I have to say that at first there's shock, because I'm not different than most people who've grown up with a pretty normalish life. I mean, parents get divorced and things like that, but someone who was probably raised in suburbia, my life was just fairly normal. And at first you're just in shock, and then you're kind of numb because you're being drugged and you're also in trauma. So you're in a fog at first. But I do remember feeling, number one, a tenacity to not accept what I was being told. Like I knew who I was, and you couldn't tell me that anything different. I knew who I was. For me to be made to look like something, because when the drugs, when your eyes, when you're asleep, they wake you up and you're functioning, you're talking, and you're not there. So somebody has made you look completely different than how you are. That was completely different than how I was. So that made me angry. So I go between anger and a tenacity to keep going, but also this feeling began to happen where I began to discover what the world really was. And not the world in its entirety, but what there really was going on in the world. It was like this veil coming off and seeing things and realizing how big things are that are not right. And that feeling was probably the scariest feeling of all. The feeling of a whole other reality of what's going on. And how are you going to tell any regular people and get support when they've made it, like at that time, it was even more difficult to explain to people than it is at this time. Part of the reason I have a ministry is to make it less difficult for other victims to explain if they've already heard the story from me or from others. So the heart, there's isolation, and you're supposed to feel isolated. That's what the idea is. You're supposed to be silenced, you're supposed to be isolated, and that wasn't me. But the reality of what the world was really capable of and how many people were involved, not only in them inviting them in to hurt you, but watching it. They had a lot of people watching it that knew I was hurt, that they participated in this. They enjoyed that. Women and men. And so that was stunned. And not knowing how to even take that in was I don't know if that's a feeling, but it definitely was along those lines. And then I wrote this paper on it once of how did I feel, and it felt like a rug being pulled out from under your feet, but it was like the world just being pulled out from under your feet, like your skin was inside out, like nothing would ever be all right again, nothing would ever be the same again, and it wasn't. So those are kind of the feelings, and then it changed, and I can tell you that other feelings came along the way when you're rescued, and when people take your hand for the first time after 10 years, and they embrace you, and they believe you, and they take you in, and they protect you. And then finding out that there's not just evil, but there's good. That there's an opposite to that, and it's real. So those are other feelings that happened much later, but that made the second time survivable. So.